Let me start with a little bit of a story. I feel like working with fairy tales, working with myth is a big part of the work that I do. And it teaches us in ways where it's really unexpected, right? We experience the unfolding of these lessons. There's this resonance, right? When we hear something and it just lands deeply in the heart, or even there can be resonance also where we're like, ooh, I don't like that. I need to step back from that. And myth and fairy tales are two of the ways that we can really get in touch with these hidden elements that are within us, within the psyche. So, I have a lot to talk about when it comes to this. But first, I just want to say hello. I know this might be the first time many of you are seeing me live. It's the first time all of you are seeing me live on this platform. But I know some of you are new to my world, so I just want to say thank you for being here. Welcome. Thanks for listening. And I hope that you enjoy our experience today. My name is Melissa Kim Corter. I work with the shadow in a creative way. I help people by finding beauty in darkness. I actually describe darkness as invisible light and allowing things to reach conscious awareness, right? So, my background is in depth psychology, in Jungian archetypal studies. I'm technically a depth psychologist, but I have to say ABD, which means all but dissertation. So all the coursework, all the stuff is done. I'm just currently writing about the shadow for my dissertation. And it's been a really, excuse my like silly language, but a deep dive, truly into the unconscious in ways I did not expect. So part of what I want to share with you today is a bit of personal experience. It's often how I teach. Thank you, B, and thank you for being here. So you're so welcome, and I hope this resonates. And it's such an interesting thing because a lot of people, when they hear shadow work or darkness, the mind instantly kind of becomes a little hyper vigilant, right? A little cautious, a little concerned and weary. Like, what does that mean? Am I opening myself up to a world of chaos or dangerous things? Absolutely not. I think of it like, have you ever had a moment where you're sitting outside and it's dark, it's calm, it's still, you might have a gentle breeze, you just look up and you notice the stars in the sky, and it just has this feeling that just washes through you. It's this sacred feeling of connection. Yet there's this recognition that the darkness of the night sky is necessary to not only see what's visible, right? The stars that are appearing, but to give us access to this sensation, this feeling that we don't have in the same context, in the same way during our waking hours when the sun is out, right? So both are extremely valuable. We are meant to explore the totality of our personality. Our personality, from a perspective of wholeness, includes both darkness and light. And it's a misunderstanding that the dark side of that equation has to be negative, or has to be evil, or has to be filled with terrible things. And what I've learned is I thrive in darkness. I thrive in moments where there's stillness and the lights are out and I'm alone with my sacred connection to all that is, whatever that means to you. You might say universe, you might say God, you might say God of your understanding. I don't care what you call it, but we each connect to that infinite potential, right? Whatever that is within us, we all can connect to that differently. My teachings revolve around those that are called to walk on the moonlit path, right? Which means the internal, the hidden, the mysterious. It isn't so much that darkness needs to be filled with monsters and creatures, although that is a small part of my work that I enjoy too. Mainly, I help people find beauty in darkness. And fairy tales and myths are a wonderful way to bridge that work for those that are uncertain or new to it. A little background quick before we jump in further here. I came out of an industry that awakened something magical, amazing, wonderful in me, and at the same time crippled me and made me feel so isolated and alone. and confused. I had no clue who I was. I felt divided, deeply divided within myself. I was connected to what I would refer to as like the spiritual industry, personal development industry. There's so much value there, so much healing. I have incredible mentors who operate within those industries that to this day I hold in high regard. So it has nothing to do with their presence or their teachings. This unfolding that happened within me, this deep disconnect, had to do with I didn't know how to locate. I didn't have a home for all of me. I didn't have a place where I could thrive with my darker interests. It seemed to scare people or push them away a little bit, or they would be like, "You need to watch your vibration. You need to vibe higher." And what is wrong with you? Why would you like? You like cemeteries and psychological thrillers and heavy metal music? Like what? That doesn't fit into our model. So I always felt divided. I felt like I could be most of myself to most people, but then I felt almost a little bit of shame. Like I need to hide this other part of me because it's not of the light, it's not high vibe. And it was often mistaken as being evil, which is not true at all. So I didn't feel at home until I started to trust my intuition, which led me to discovering things like depth psychology, which honors the light and the dark, different aspects of earth based healing, right? Like shamanism and different influences of that kind that honor both the dark and the light. And then I realized, oh my gosh, it isn't so much darkness that I'm learning from as much as it is reclaiming the power to purify, to transmute what lands on my path, what stands before me. And I have recently found a way to reconcile all of this that was going on within me, where I could blend my love of darkness and shadow and think of like being tucked in the womb, right? Or under a warm blanket and deep in meditation, all the lights are off. Maybe you have a candle, maybe not. There's so much value in these experiences of silence and stillness that require some darkness. And all that means is we're turning the light down, not so that we're not operating from the light, but so that we're tapping into the invisible light within. We get to shine differently. I call it personally radiant darkness, right? It's this contradictory sort of nature. And there's so much fear around that. People have these misconceptions like, well, wait a minute, this world is, it's so difficult as it is. There's so much darkness. Why? Why? With law of attraction and everything we know, why would we put our attention on more darkness? What I've learned is that we're not putting our attention on darkness. We are fiercely stepping into the perceptions, the obstacles, the things on our path that thrive in darkness, but we bring our consciousness to them and then they shift. Then darkness is stillness and beauty and power and grace. So I call my Substack here is called Hauntingly Beautiful Things. It's for people that maybe necessarily haven't fit into these boxes, right? Where we have to be all love and light on one in one moment and we can't curse. We can't like weird shit. We're not allowed to like psychological thrillers. Let me tell you, if you saw my playlist right now, you would be like, "What? She goes from Diva Pramal to Corn like in the blink of an eye." I'm like, "Yes, I do. That's who I am. Those are my influences. I grew up reading Stephen King and listening to Ozzy Osbourne. It's who I am. It does not lower my vibration. It actually is such an empowering thing. I tap into this energy and I create from this place of love and depth, and I bring beauty and light and warmth into the dark places that we fear, and I teach other people how to do the same. So mythic resonance, how does that tie into all of this? Myths and stories show us how. They give us the way. They are the maps for how we can access what's been hidden, what's been concealed in the places we're afraid to look at. Because what I've learned is as we venture in to those experiences and we look at the things that haunt us, we look for the things that keep us small. We don't accumulate more of that, right? If your intention is to purify, if your intention is to transmute, so that you can then elevate, so you can then deepen at the same time. Wholeness is about contrast. We need to learn how to have opposition in our experiences. This is what they teach us in alchemy. Alchemy doesn't work because we focus on the positive. Alchemy works because we look at the tough, disgusting, nasty shit, which is called the prima materia, by the way. The alchemists start with this base matter, and it's this disgusting sludge. It is this material that is gross and difficult, and nobody wants to look at it at all. But the alchemists know that when they put that in the vessel, and then they trust their instincts, and they know what they need to add, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and they keep going. Then they also know they need to put the cap on, they need to put the lid on the vessel so the magic can work. We don't do this in our society, and we're taught to escape our difficult feelings. We're taught to leave, to avoid, to turn away, and we cling to the light to escape dealing with our difficult things. But the alchemists knew that when you put the lid on, tension builds, and the tension creates the magic because those ingredients come to life, and it gets messy, and the heat builds, and you start to sweat, and you just want out. You want to be done with the circumstance. You want to run away from the problem. You've had too much. You feel the pressure. You don't know what to do. And it's in that moment that usually what happens is full on surrender. And the moment we surrender, what we're doing, the ego, by the way, a part of the psyche is the ego. It's a gatekeeper between conscious awareness and all that's hidden in our unconscious. The ego starts to break down. So when we surrender, we are teaching the ego how to receive. It looks like magic because all of a sudden, things that we wanted that were held back because they were pushed down from our own suppression. So repression happens automatically. That's when the ego decides we don't want to think about something, we don't want to feel it. It's automatic. We don't even have a say. It just pushes that content down into the unconscious. It sits and it waits in shadow. Suppression is when we intentionally do this. We're fully aware. I don't want to feel that. I don't want to look at that. I want to have nothing to do with it. And then we push that content down. The alchemists know that all of that pressure, the not wanting to feel it, the not wanting to look at it, it builds to a certain point, and then we surrender. And then that's when the process settles. And then you take that lid off and you've got pure gold. There's no more darkness. There's no more dank, disturbing, disgusting matter. The matter has been transformed. That's what the alchemists knew. That's what they knew how to do, how to work with. They didn't run away from the tough stuff. They actually remembered their power and went straight on into it. And that's what we do in shadow work. It doesn't have to be messy all the time. It doesn't have to be all about staring and facing down our traumas in every second, of everything we're doing. In fact, that's a problem of itself. If we're always doing that, we're just digging. We're just digging and digging. We're looking at ourselves like an ongoing project that needs fixing. And I can tell you, my friends, we are not here to be fixed. We're already whole as we are. We need to remember our wholeness. So now, how does this relate to mythic resonance? Okay, mythic resonance is actually a term that came to me. Those of you that know me know this little secret. When I'm around water, forget it. The intuitive like impressions that come through are insane. If I'm soaking in the tub, taking a shower, even just washing my hands, the things that start streaming through me are just they're profound. Maybe even just for me, they're profound. But I get these intuitive ideas and things that move through. So mythic resonance came to me, and I'm going to tell you the story now, and I'm going to lead us to a little bit of a practice, if that's okay. If you'd like to join me in that. So I was having this issue. Let's start there. I was having this issue. And I don't know if you've ever had this kind of an experience, but maybe you did something, and this could be in your personal life, this can be in your work, where maybe you had a little success or you had a little something good happen, and you thought, I'm going to do that again. It worked so well, I'm going to do that again. So you do it again, and you're like riding this momentum. This is what happened to me. I launched this class. This was about 5 years ago ish. um give or take. About 5 years ago, I launched this class, and it was the first time that I exceeded a financial goal. I'll just say that. I exceeded a financial goal and it blew my mind. It was the first time I made a certain amount of money in my business as an entrepreneur, teaching like this online. And it was infectious. It was exciting. The people were charged. The women that were in this community that were participating in this work blew my mind. They were incredible. It was an amazing experience. I was riding this high. I had all this momentum. So what did I say? Well, I'm going to do it again. So I like duplicated the process and I taught another workshop and I had all these people sign up and more money came in and I was like this is fantastic. I got a little caught up in the momentum of that excitement. I lost sight of the intuitive part which said, "Now go here. Now do it this way." My ego was like, no, 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 this is working. We're making money. We're helping people. This is fantastic. Let's stay here. My ego took control of the circumstance of the situation. So what did I do? Third time's the charm, right? Let me run this thing again. I'm going to do this. It collapsed. It was a freaking nightmare. I promise you, all of this is going somewhere. So I teach this third class, and what do I notice? Well, first of all, the title. I'm not going to tell you the title specifically because I don't want to. It's not about specifics around that. I taught this workshop, and it wasn't the same thing. And I'm like, something's wrong. What's going on? And next thing you know, what started to happen is all the complainers came out. All the complainers came out of the woodwork. I started having people complaining. They were just sharing their problems. They weren't doing the work. I was like, oh, this feels heavy. This feels so heavy. This isn't what I want. I don't want to sit with people in their bullshit. Excuse my language, but I don't. I'm like, I'm not that kind of mentor or coach. Like, I don't want to sit here and listen to people complain. I'm about solutions, right? I want to move some energy. I want to feel good. And it was like walking through cement. All of a sudden, this workshop, I was so eager and so excited, but from my ego, it wasn't a soulful nudge. We can tell the difference when we really pay attention. It was from my ego. I created that entire workshop around my ego. I had maybe 10 people show up, which is still a good number, by the way. There's nothing wrong with 10 people. But when you teach something of a similar nature and you have 60 or 75 people show up and you're really like this on fire with it, and then you do something from the ego, you can notice a shift in your numbers. They're just a response. It's just a energetic response. And then the quality of the experience was terrible. It felt so heavy that people weren't showing up. They were like, I don't want to go to that. Like, there's just going to be people complaining and whining. So then the people that I actually loved engaging with, they didn't show up. I got stuck with the others who just wanted to be in their story. They wanted to be in their excuse. And I learned a very difficult lesson, but this also created an issue. I learned a lesson of what happens when you don't honor your intuition, number one, when you're chasing an ego desire versus really being in service to your soul. Okay. And that's different for each one of us. And then what happened is it collapsed. The whole thing collapsed and I lost steam. So after that, I just really collapsed within myself. And this is something will happen with the ego when it doesn't feel important anymore, when it doesn't feel special, when it feels like things just aren't working. All the unworthiness shit comes in, right? All the self-doubt, all the things infected my mind, my vibe, my field, my intentions. I kind of collapsed within myself and I felt so defeated. I lost touch with who I was, all because I listened to my ego and not my soul. And it just started me down this path of spiraling. I think many of us have been there. So I'm spiraling. And then I felt like everything I tried to do from that point on for a long time, it didn't work. I would get all excited. I would do all the things. I had the marketing campaigns. I paid thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to coaches and to mentors and whatever, to systems and funnels and programs and all the shit that we do. Especially those of you that are entrepreneurs, you know what I'm talking about. I did all the things. And I kept racking up more debt and feeling really empty and disconnected and like I was failing. But here's the thing that I didn't see. This is the thing I didn't see that ties us to this mythic resonance. I kept getting this little impression, and it would come through my words. And when I would share with a mentor or a friend or a colleague, I would just be like, I can't explain it, but I feel like I'm dragging people through the mud trying to help them. Or I feel like I'm dragging people up this mountain to try to bring them somewhere. Like, what is it about? Why am I doing that? My logical mind knows that's not how you guide people. You don't force, you don't push, you don't control. That's ego, right? But I, as a leader, as someone that was hired to help people, support people, guide and nurture them, I felt also like I was carrying them in a weird way up this mountain. And then when I would get close to some type of success, achievement, a new threshold, breaking through that barrier, it would almost kind of crumble and I'd have to start over again. I had no clue that that image of me carrying a boulder up a mountain was becoming what we call in depth psychology constellated within the psyche. There's these images, metaphors that we have that we don't even know are active within the psyche until something happens. So here's what happened. And this is what led me to mythic resonance. And then again, I'll share a practice with you guys so you can see and kind of lean into this further. So that was almost 5 years ago. And I thought, you know what the problem is? The problem is the clients. It's not my work. It's not me. It's the type of people I'm working with. So I hire this coach. Oh my gosh, it was a nightmare. I paid a fortune to this coach. I'm almost embarrassed to say how much money I was paying to this coach for him to try to give me these concepts. No, don't get me wrong. They worked for many people. And he, in his own right, was an incredible soul. I'm not trying to dismiss his support, but it wasn't what I needed. I didn't know what I needed. I thought I needed somebody else to step in and help me. So I'm paying this person, and he's saying, you need to call in a high vibe client. You need to stop messing around with people that are, in this heaviness and all this stuff and whatever. And I believed him. And I was like, okay, it's about attracting these high vibe people, and I'm going to speak their language. And I felt so defeated. I started making a lot of money, and I felt so hollow and so empty and so disconnected from my soul. I'm like, this can't be the answer. This can't be the answer. And then what would happen again is all of a sudden I was like, I feel like I'm carrying a whole bunch of new people up a mountain. Like, what is going on here? So it didn't work. And again, I thought, it's the coaching. That's the problem, right? The mentoring. That's my problem. And so let me stop coaching people and I'm going to put my attention on creating content. I'm going to do what I do best, which is teach and share and inspire through courses and classes and workshops. And so I did that. And next thing you know, the same thing happened. Oh my gosh, why does it feel like I'm trying to push people up a mountain to sell my thing, to market my thing, to get them to follow through on my thing? Why are they like coming in all desperate and not doing the work that could help them? What is going on? And it's felt so personal. And like, there must be something wrong with me. There must be something wrong with me. And so I started describing that same process. I feel like I'm carrying these people up a mountain. So here's what happened. I'm going to spare you the next like 10 minutes of that story and say I repeated that process a few more times. I went to different things. I tried to do different things. I tried to pivot like we all do and just try something else. I was passionate about helping people. I know I am gifted. We all are. But I knew how to channel that gift in a way to serve other people. I just felt like something was off. I was missing something. And so I tried multiple things, and all of those things eventually got to the same place of why do I feel like I'm carrying these people up a mountain? This doesn't feel right. Where's the grace and ease that everybody talks about, right? So then I decide to really dive into myself. I'm going to do my work. I know shadow work, right? I know it's my background, it's my training, it's my expertise. There's clearly something in my shadow. There's clearly something going on here. And here's what happened. So when you really choose to commit to your path, synchronicities will start to show up. And there's never a synchronicity that's too small. And they can show us the myths that we're living out. They can show us the fairy tales that might sort of unlock something else in the psyche to give us some more direction, some guidance, to reconnect us to that soulfulness, to shift our orientation from ego to soul, which is really what a lot of us are trying to do. That's part of something we call individuation. This is a Jungian term. It means the great unfolding of the self. We're really gathering and recollecting parts of ourself, and integrating them into the personality so that we experience more wholeness. This is why we focus on shadow and light. They're both needed. So when I dove in and I started doing that work, here's what happened. That image of carrying the boulder up the mountain was popping into my head. I decided to go to my Kindle. This was an intuitive nudge. Go to your Kindle, just read something inspirational. That always kind of takes me back. I go to my Kindle and I find this book, and it's a Jungian analyst who's also a shamanic practitioner and teacher. Dr. Carl Greer was the author, and he it was a book about changing the narrative of your story. And I thought, yeah, that's what I'm doing. I'm changing the narrative of the story, and I'm just reading his insights and his perspectives, and I'm kind of nodding because I'm like, yeah, I resonate with this. I get this. This is very similar to how I work with myself and others, right? And that image of the boulder and the mountain keeps popping into my head, and I get to a passage in his book, and he starts to describe a client who had this image about her life, her business just felt like she was drowning. She just felt like she was trying to tread water. And every time she got a little bit further, it was like more water came in. She had to work harder. So she never got the release, the reprieve, the relief that she wanted. She just had to keep on working harder. I started having chills all through me. I was deeply resonating with this idea. And that boulder on the mountain was popping into my head. Well, sure enough, I keep reading. And then it clearly says, and you can look this up in the book, it clearly says, you might also feel like, hold on, Sisyphus, who, this is a myth, Sisyphus, who escaped his fate of death. This is the myth part. I'll come back to the Carl Greer part in a second. Sisyphus escaped his fate of death, and he did it through manipulation and deceit. Now, he was caught though. And so his punishment for being deceptive was that the gods condemned him to a eternal task. He would forever roll a massive boulder up a steep hill. And just as he was about to reach the summit, the boulder would always roll back down. And then he would be forced to begin again. I'm like, what? I have the image in my mind, the boulder up the mountain happening. Oh my gosh, yes, Marie Eve, yes, Sisyphus has been on my mind for the past weeks. Synchronicity. That was in the book. And I was like, are you kidding me? I have had this image in my psyche for years. I was giving it power. Every time I was describing my struggle, I was feeding that image. I was constellating that image. Another way to say this is I was the neural pathways in my brain were routed around fulfilling that image in my work. Anytime I got close to anything being meaningful for me, that was going to be the manifestation of it. It would have to be. It would have to be, right? For those of you that believe in law of attraction, by the way, I have an amazing, well, I think it's amazing. Hopefully you'll enjoy it too. I have an article coming out tomorrow for those of you that are on Substack, an article on the parallels between working with the dark goddesses and law of attraction through Abraham Hicks. If you're interested to see how to reconcile that, because I didn't know how to do that. And I had this entire thing streamed through me. So there will be an article tomorrow, I'm sorry, Friday, that comes out that you can access here all about that. So back to this myth. So I'm reading this book. I'm having this image pop into my mind. And then I'm reading about the him describing this myth, and I have chills all through me. And then I'm like, what is this? Like, I study mythology, I study fairy tales. My training is all about how to see the patterns, the connections and things, to be able to discern these things. How did I not know? I was so unconscious to the way that this myth was activated in my nervous system. So everything I was creating was coming from that myth. It had to be hard. It had to revolve around me carrying the weight, the responsibility, the burden of the people, the emotional burdens, the intensity of the desire of, well, what if they fail? What if it doesn't work? What if how I'm mentoring, how I'm coaching them? What if it fails? What if it backfires? What if something horrible happens to them? I was unconsciously burdening myself with their outcome. That's not what we're supposed to do. Now, I knew this logically, but energetically, this was alive within me. So that's an example. Long story, but I had to share the story to show you how alive these things are. Because if I were to just read in a book, you have an image in your psyche, things play out according to that image, and then based on your energy, you're going to attract that image or the likeness of that image or that myth, on and on and on. That would have remained in the level of mind that is logic. It wouldn't have been an embodied, felt sense of, oh my gosh, this is happening. So mythic resonance is my concept of when there's a storyline, when there's a patterning happening that's playing out. Now, the beauty in this is it's playing out for us. We are the ones that are we're going to need to create a new image in the mind, and I'll tell you how to do that, and I'm going to walk you through that process. But I had to acknowledge that image. I had to grieve that part of me that was that I contributed to creating, that took on the responsibility of others. That was my people pleasing behavior. It manifested through my work, right? Because that's what happens. Another way of saying this is the wounded healer archetype. A lot of us that are in any type of service work, and I don't mean to say that like in a spiritual way. I don't care if you're a plumber, if you're a lawyer. I don't care if you work at the airport or you're a greeter at Walmart. Like, service work is service work. If it's soulful, right, it's service work. It's not about your job, it's not about your title or your role. It's where you come from. It's what drives you, right? But when you are someone that cares about that, being driven by soul, but you're feeling the weight, the heaviness, the burdens of the human condition, you're not as helpful as you think you are, right? We actually are blocking people from their potential, and I was blocking myself from my potential, and I had to let in a really hard truth. This happens when the ego softens. By the way, we let ourselves see a little more. That's how you know the ego's learning to receive. It softens. Our defenses soften. Our armoring is not so tough and rigid. We let ideas in that maybe were blocking us before. And when I saw that image and I thought about that image, I went, okay. So guess what happened? I started thinking about this image. Then I have a call with my analyst. I work with a Jungian analyst. I have so many forms of support in my life. Um, and she's a beautiful blend of like spiritual teaching and Jungian analysis, which is really analyzing thoughts and using these Jungian principles and shadow and light and stuff like that. I don't even tell her about this coincidence, or about the changing the story or the image, right? I just, as I got on my call with her, I launched into a problem in my work, and I was like, how do I, make A, B, and C happen or whatever? And she's kind of talking through, and she goes, does that feel really heavy? And I was like, why would you ask me that? I was like, yeah, it kind of does. And I'm like, son of a bitch. And then I'm like, it's the image again, isn't it? And she's like, what are you talking about? She's like, it sounds like you need to really hold a different image within your psyche. And I went, let me tell you. And then I told her about what I saw, what I read, the boulder up the mountain. She knew the myth right away. She's like, no more, no more pushing boulders up mountains for you. That's not what you're here to do. You learned your lesson from pushing up the boulders, right? You've done that enough. There is no amount of efforting that's going to make you feel worthy from here on out. You just have to accept the worthiness now. So here's what I did. I changed my inner image. And it takes work, friends. Like, it wasn't like, I decided and it changed. A change began, like planting a seed. I changed that inner image to one that you might have seen it posted. I'm not sure. I'll share it here. It's this beautiful key. It first of all, it's like dark in the background, like the night sky, and then there's these golden flecks, and there's this key right in the center. And my new inner image is this key that when I come back to my truth, to my soulfulness, I have everything I need within me. I don't need to effort in that way. There's no heavy lifting. There's no heaviness at all. That key, I unlock what's needed and I listen to my intuition to guide me. And would you believe that as I began practicing that a few times a day, sometimes I would consciously sit with it and remind myself of that image. Other times, life, which has a way of doing this, would remind me of what my image needed to be. If I started to feel like, oh, that's so heavy, I'd be like, no, 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 it's not. And I would tune right back into that inner image of the key. And I am now constellating that within my psyche. That's my new image. I get to unlock things. Everything I need is here. Everything I want is here. I can choose. I may not be able to choose every monster that shows up on my path, every obstacle, every injustice, every what have you that is presented before me. I may not know how or what to do, but if I come back to my image, I will be given the next step. This is why the second part of mythic resonance is about following the breadcrumbs. And following the breadcrumbs, my friends, is it's not a linear path like we want it to be. So in the story of Hansel and Gretel, the it's really a difficult story, right? Because it starts out with these two children being abandoned by the parents, by the father and the stepfather. Um, they're poor. They don't have enough money, enough food to provide for their family. So the wicked, nasty stepmother says to the stepfather, we need to get rid of the children, because we can't afford to feed ourselves or to feed them, so let's just get rid of them. Don't ask me why, but we need the grimness, literally, of the fairy tales. We need the darker parts of the fairy tales. They create the contrast we need that births a soulful desire within us. When we are met with that contrast, something is born in that moment. The psyche starts to give us new images. We start to have different impressions. New desires come out of this ugly thing, right? So in the tale, Hansel overhears this and he's like, okay, they're going to abandon us. I'm going to put all of these pebbles in my pocket so that when they leave us in the woods, I can leave them on the path and I'll find my way home. So that's what they do. So the parents throw the kids and wherever, and they go deep into the forest to say they're going to go gather something, right? They have some ruse or something to lead the children there. And along the way, Hansel is putting these pebbles on the ground. And it works. The first time it works. So the parents say, we'll be back, children. And they leave. They don't come back. And so Hansel says, don't worry, Gretel. I left the pebbles. We'll find our way home. So they find their way home. A couple days later, the stepmother again says, we need to do it again. We need to we need to really complete this plan and leave these children because we can't afford them. So once again, Hansel overhears the conversation and he knows that once again they're going to be abandoned by their parents. This time he decides to take bread and leave little breadcrumbs so that they can find their way home. So they get left in the middle of the forest. They wait a little while. Parents aren't coming back. And then when Hansel tries to go find the breadcrumbs, they're gone. The birds came in. The ravens or crows came in and they ate all of the breadcrumbs so that they couldn't find their way home. They were forced to do something different. So I promise you the story gets better and has a happy ending, but I want to focus on this part for mythic resonance, right? When you even hear that, there's things activated within the psyche. We have these core wounds that I focus on. There's 5 of them. There's betrayal, rejection, humiliation, abandonment, and violation. So when these things come up in a fairy tale, in a myth, we might recognize a pattern there. We might recognize betrayal, abandonment, rejection, all of it, violation, humiliation. And there's multiple ones that kind of connect together, right? But here's the part of the story that's often missed. Even though it works out for the children, they're okay. They end up finding their way. They go to the witch and they go through all these nightmares, circumstances, and she tries to cook them and eat them and all these things, but they escape. They escape. They steal her riches and they find their way home and they live happily ever after in this tale. But in that beginning segment, it is so rich with the potential for mythic resonance, right? For this response we can have to really sinking deeper into what it is that's operating within our psyche. What we sometimes miss. So let's just think of that act, right? It's interesting because sometimes how the tale is told, Hansel is upset with the birds. The birds have eaten the breadcrumbs. There's nothing to follow. There's no longer a trail. What do we do when there's no longer a trail? And in that moment, Hansel feels betrayed by the birds. Isn't it interesting? There's no mention of being betrayed by the parents who abandoned them in the first place. No, I'm not saying to take that literally. That's not how we work with myth and fairy tales. We don't look at the literal figures and make assumptions. We look for the mythic resonance. We look for the underlying feeling, the emotion, the symbolism, all of that. But it's so interesting that his attention goes to the birds and feeling betrayed by the birds and not the parents, right? Just something to consider. Here's how my psyche interpreted that. I had this really deep flash, this intuitive insight, and it was, you know what? Sometimes invisible forces step into our lives to do the thing that we don't have the courage to do, or sometimes some external circumstance happens to reroute us. What if the birds were actually acting in service to Hansel and Gretel? What if they weren't meant to go home? What if they weren't betraying them by eating those breadcrumbs, but instead saying, I know something you don't hear, and you're not meant to go back there. You're not wanted or welcome there. There's somewhere else for you to go. And it's really difficult for us to feel into and experience some of these hard truths about life, relationships, family dynamics, parents, influences. We all have what I call impactful moments. I use this word instead of trauma because I feel like sometimes with some of us and the word trauma, we go into a little comparison. But we can all resonate with impact. We've all had impactful moments, right? Something that shifted something, something that altered something deeply within us. So even that idea of shifting the story of the betrayal of the birds to all of a sudden this secret wisdom, this protection that on the surface looks like betrayal, looks like, oh my gosh, why would you do that? I had this plan. I had this plan. I was going to follow those breadcrumbs and I was going to go home, right? That's what the ego says. The ego says, I want to do it my way. The ego wants to feel safe. The ego wants to feel that it's safe, it's protected, that it's in control, that it's in charge. But the soul knows there's other ways here. And on the surface, you may think that what I'm doing is betraying you. But down deep below, what if that door closing, the disappearance of those breadcrumbs, the path becoming super unclear, what if that was in service to your soul? So you can no longer remain small. So you are no longer stuck carrying a boulder of a mountain, but instead discovering that you have this key within you. And that, my friends, is my story. It's changed my life dramatically to work with these inner images. So I'd like to give us an opportunity. First, if you're still there, share a little bit if you feel guided to. Thumbs up. You resonating with this? How do you feel about what I'm saying? Anything coming up for you? I'd love to have it be a little conversational. I know it's kind of weird, like I'm on here and you guys are text based down there, but or out there. But yeah, just oh, Kayla, hello. Yeah, so just something to consider, right? Things don't always look the way that we want them to, and our breadcrumbs are not always visible. And this truly teaches the ego how to receive. It's when we surrender over and over again. We can't always say when the breadcrumbs will disappear, when the birds are going to come out of nowhere. We don't always know the language of the symbols or how the psyche is speaking to us. But if we listen, we tune in. Thank you for the feedback. Um, we will be guided. There will be something there. There will be something there for us to discover. I saw a crow raven yesterday out of nowhere. I love that. Yeah, and it's just amazing what happens. So these are exactly what I'm talking about when I say we can that's working with shadow. Shadow isn't just about heavy, intense, disowned parts. This is my frustration with surface level shadow work. And I'm not trying to knock people that do that because we all have things that resonate with us. It never resonated with me. I've always been a deep diver. I've always wanted to dive into subjects and content and things so deeply, which is why the octopus is one of my symbols actually that came to me in a dream and the work that I'm meant to do with people. And but when we really start to understand shadow is also about this, more of a vessel, right? It's a container. It holds things for us beneath conscious awareness. Another example, if you want, and we're going to go into our guided practice here. If you are someone who wants to feel more confident, that more confidence, that doesn't come from the outside. You know this, that comes from shadow, because shadow holds the unmanifest potential within us too. It's another way to say, I have this quality that I feel like it's possible for me. I just haven't manifested that, or it hasn't materialized, or it's not really solid in my mind yet. I don't have evidence of it, right? And so what that means is it hasn't been integrated into your personality, but it's waiting for you in shadow. And so when you develop more confidence, it means you're allowing that to rise up from the unconscious to become part of the totality of your psyche. Then it's practiced and demonstrated and lived in the world. Embodied is a way to say this. And then when we embody something, we've also moved it out of shadow and given it to consciousness, which means that information that has moved from the shadow reaches the ego. The ego is the threshold, once again, between the consciousness or consciousness and what is beneath our conscious awareness. So that means an aha moment. That's when something's come up from shadow and hit the ego and it goes, ooh, I got this idea. You just let information through. You let more of you through to reach you. You let more of your consciousness that was hidden reach your ego, which is learning to receive. It's learning to expand its view. When we start out on this path, sometimes we're hurt, sometimes we're lost. So our ego might feel like a flashlight that's super focused on one thing. But the more you work in shadow, you learn to have a little bit of creative control and shift the ego from a heavy, intense focus light to a dimmer switch that lets more information come through. So, how do we want to work with this? We want to start to shift our inner imagery, right? I'm going to just share here first. Hi, Kayla. She said, I felt rejected recently in regard to my personal work, but haven't yet figured out why. So, I'm hoping to discover what I'm not getting with this. First of all, I love you for just putting it out there, right? Like acknowledging that, hey, you know what? There's a part of me that's feeling rejected. There's a part of me that feels in the dark about this. Even the language I want to use is still very shadowy and it's in the dark. Doesn't mean it's not there. It's just, it's in the dark. It hasn't reached my conscious awareness yet. So I'm hoping to discover, we bring it to consciousness, what I'm not getting. Okay, so I love that. So I would lean into that. So let's work with this. You, Kayla, you can work with this piece. For everybody else that's watching, I'd like for you in this moment, based on what I just kind of talked about, with the story of the boulder up the mountain, if you could take something, it can be a problem, a situation. It doesn't have to feel heavy or difficult. If that's what it is, that's okay. Maybe it feels like an obstacle. Maybe it's just a threshold where you're like, everything's okay. I just want more magic. Or I just want to be in touch with something more than I'm currently experiencing. Maybe that's it for you. But I want you to just think about that. If you have a journal or a notebook, like something to write, but just take a moment and kind of sit with that. What is it? What is your matter, your prima materia, the thing we're starting with in the vessel, right? In alchemy. What is that base level substance? It can be a problem, and well, which we know are opportunities. So think about that for a second. And as you kind of think about this situation, now you don't need to know mythology. You don't need to know the fairy tales. That's where I come in. I can help you with all that down the road. And I'll give you a little secret on what you can do to figure that out too for yourself. But maybe let's just track the pattern. See, shadow gives us evidence, and the evidence shows up in our behaviors, our consistent patterns. So if you have a circumstance, you have a situation, and you don't know how to get around it, you don't know what it is, how does it feel? What is the quality of it? When you think about this thing, what does it feel like to you? Just kind of take note of that. Maybe write that down on your notebook. Do you feel like you're floating about mindlessly, not anchored to anything? Maybe like a balloon in the air? Do you feel like I did? Like it's just so intense and heavy to just constantly pushing this boulder up a mountain, almost like a sense of punishment. Like, what did I do to have things feel this hard? Right? That's how I felt. I felt like I was actually being punished. I didn't know I was the one creating that image within myself. Maybe you feel like you're treading water and you're having a hard time keeping afloat. I had a client recently say she felt like every way that she turned, it just felt like daggers or stones were coming at her, like she was being stoned by others, no matter what she did. I was like, that's interesting. That's an interesting image. Maybe spiraling. A lot of us use the language of the spiral. Might say we're spiraling. Just feel like we're losing control. Another image I've heard is I feel like I'm Alice and I've gone down the rabbit hole and I'm in the dark and there's no bottom and I don't know what's happening and I'm just sort of flailing, right? So sit with it doesn't have to be the story, but sit with the energy. What does the energy feel like? And the next thing you do is ask your psyche. Your psyche speaks to you in images. It's a symbolic language. It's not always a linear, analytical process, word for word for word for word. Sometimes it's just this, right? Janice, it feels far away and dark. Excellent. So the image that you might have, right? Alice, yeah, you might have something like that. It might feel like, I know there's magic. I believe in magic. Why do I feel out of touch with that magic, right? Now, yours may be something like that or something else. So think about that, write that down. The quality of the experience. Sometimes the environment, is it a landscape you can recognize? Is it a desert? Sometimes I've heard that too. Like, man, there's just no resources here. It feels like a desert or the dead of winter. Nothing is alive and everything is lacking vitality. Or what is your image? And nature is a wonderful way to work with this. If you don't know the stories, the myths, the fairy tales, and you're feeling a little lost, don't worry. Is there a reflection of nature? Because here's the secret: fairy tales and nature are deeply connected through this implicate order that's going on beneath the surface of all of it. Which is why often when you work with fairy tales, all of a sudden synchronicities will increase. And same thing with nature. We often see a lot of our synchronistic moments within the natural world. So maybe there's something in nature that could represent how you're feeling. I know for me, when I was really ill a couple of years back, I say now that I was dying with COVID. I know that sounds a little intense, but I really felt I was. I know a lot of it was quite a bit of an emotional, psychological death, which we call an ego death, but very physical, very physical. My entire body was breaking down, and it was frightening. And when I was going through that, the image at the time that I was given was I was deep in this cave and people I loved dearly were worried about me and trying to reach me. And I felt like I could hear a slight echo of their voice somewhere out there, but I was just so deep in this cave. And so what I did is I surrendered to that cave and I let myself be nurtured in the dark, in the stillness. I just let myself surrender and be nurtured. And I found my way back home after that. So you may resonate with that. You might have something similar. So here's what I want you to do. Think about that. Write that down if you haven't already, adding some qualities, thinking about it. Close your eyes. And if it hasn't, okay, great. Kayla walking around town, knocking on doors. That's a great image. So now, everybody, if you feel safe to do so, just close your eyes and let your image come in, right? Give it, ask your psyche to project on the landscape of your mind, your inner eye. You might have a movie screen that you see when you close your eyes. It might just be a dark screen. I want you to imagine this image. If it has some movement, like a movie, that's okay too. So for Kayla, she might, in her mind's eye, see herself walking around, knocking on doors. Janice might see herself in the dark, hearing and sensing that there are things, but they're far away. Your image might include a landscape, nature, something else. Just be with it and ask your psyche to fill it in a little bit more, just to give it a little more detail. How does it feel? You might even find yourself saying, oh, every time I try to do this, it feels like this. That's a great shortcut. Every time I want this, it feels like this. Okay, just be with that. Ask yourself now, what is the energy of that? What is that? Is it heavy? Is it hard? Is it difficult? What is the energy of that experience? If you had to label it, not just describing what it looks like in your landscape, but how does it feel somatically in your body? I want you to feel into that. Do you have it appear in a certain area? Does it feel like it's in your head, in your chest, in your abdomen, in your belly, in your hips? Does it land in a certain place? Does it exist in a certain place or connect to a certain place? And now, as you look at that image, I want you to just ask your psyche. This is where you pretend that you can engage with this image, that it'll speak to you. And I want you to just engage with the image and say, what is this? What are you trying to show me? Like, what's the pattern here? And the pattern might be something as simple as you're carrying something that's not yours. You're using effort that's draining you. You're looking in the wrong place. Or it might be something like you're not doing anything wrong. Keep trusting the process, right? Whatever it is, just see if something doesn't come up. Take note and just write that down. I'll just give you a minute in silence to do that. Now, this is one of the most important parts. We know, and if you don't have it yet, you can keep on working on this. It might come to you in the coming days or weeks. Don't worry. You'll catch yourself. All of a sudden, you'll say something, go, oh my gosh, there's my image. There's my pattern. I didn't even know I was doing that, right? You'll do that. Trust me, it'll happen. But for right now, if you have your image or if you have a sense of what this mythic thing is that's playing out, this storyline, this detail, this fairy tale, whatever, I want you to think about what is the antidote. If something's heavy, what would make it feel like greater ease? Now, I had a key that appeared, and sometimes when I see that key, there's also a treasure chest with all my solutions in it in my heart. You might have something else. Maybe as you're knocking on a door, it's now one of them opens, and there's only one door that needs to open. Maybe you don't feel so far away, but maybe now you realize I felt so far away, but actually I just had to open this one little hatch that was right here, and everything I needed was right there. So maybe there's a route from your image, what you're currently experiencing, to your new image. Or maybe you just overlay it with something radically different of what you want to feel and experience. If your images have the essence of feeling broke, of poverty, of disconnect, no judgment. That is archetypal gold, my friend, is what we would say. There's gold there for you. So if that's what your image is seeming to kind of bring up, what would be the opposite? What would an image of prosperity or connection or something else? What would that look like or feel like? And it can be a snapshot. It doesn't have to be an entire process. Maybe it's one image that you hold on to. Maybe it's a candle, a lit candle that brings you peace. Maybe it's an image of a talisman that's a necklace. Maybe it's the image of something sacred and beautiful that sits in your pocket that reminds you of your power. Maybe it's something else. Maybe it's a creature that brings you hope, some type of mystical, magical creature or everyday animal that you want to constellate within the psyche to say, oh, this feels so good. Reminds me of magic, it reminds me of connection or prosperity or whatever it is. So, what is a new image? Give yourself a moment to let that come to you, and then I want you to write it down. So, I'm going to go quiet for just a second here for you to tune in to see if a different image doesn't arrive, if it hasn't already for you. Oh, I'm getting butterflies for somebody. I'm getting images for all of you. Butterflies, I'm seeing opening doors. I'm seeing an image of somebody resting, like decompressing, but they're smiling and they're laughing and they're eating popcorn from a bowl while they're laughing at whatever's on the television. And this feels like an antidote to somebody that feels like they have to work really hard. You can actually have fun and play and enjoy your life. And your new image is that every time you laugh and every time you have fun, more comes in. Anyway, there's some impressions that are coming to me for you guys. So I'm just sharing them out loud. I see somebody else, it's like a phoenix, the phoenix rising from the ashes, except there's no more pain. The pain story is over. It's just thriving. You don't need to learn through harshness anymore. You've been there, you've done that. Your new medicine is actually joy. I see somebody else's image, the spiral that was almost like all consuming spiral, all of a sudden becomes the vortex of creation. So if you've ever listened to the work of Abraham Hicks, you might recognize this the vortex of create. Oh, it's funny, Renew. I just opened my eyes and I see this the sunburst. Exactly like a so there's that. All right. So just yeah, letting that come to you. Take a moment to be with it. Now here's the most important part. I want you to go back to the old image just for a second. Just for a second. Go back to the old image and think about, really quickly evaluate all the feelings, all the heaviness or the tiredness or the fatigue or the confusion, the uncertainty, the loneliness, the whatever the old image is or represents. Just give yourself permission to be with it for 1 second. Now flip the new image. What is the new image? How does the new image feel? Flood your psyche, your consciousness right now with all of the words you want it to represent. You can just say them internally inside your mind. You're just flooding your consciousness. Good words, good words, good words, good words. Expansion, depth, connection, love, prosperity, money, solutions, ease, grace, relief, justice, whatever that means. It just came to me. Connection, joy, presence, expansion, effortless ease, flow, abundance, deeply connected, manifesting with ease and grace, allowing things to materialize with ease and grace. Just showing up, listening to your intuition, confidence, connection. I keep getting connection. Whatever this is, your new image, and if it's one big word, that's all it needs to be. Just remind yourself this is your new image, right? Because as we're focusing on this right now, we are also directing the mind, which then begins to direct the brain. We are creating new neural pathways around this image right now. And so it is, so it is, and so it is. Okay. All right. So share a little feedback if you feel guided. If you want to share your before image or after image, if you want to share how that was for you. Now, I know not all of us feel as deeply connected to our visionary capacity, right? So our internal images might be a little hazy. We might have more feeling or sensation. Also, in typology, there's four functions: there's thinking, feeling, sensation, and intuition. And so, some of us, our dominant function is intuition. We might see things more clearly. If your dominant function is thinking, you might have a harder time with the visionary creativity part. Not necessarily though. So there's all different images, right, that we can work with. But feeling is okay. So if imagery doesn't feel accessible to you just yet, a feeling can be your doorway in. You can work through feeling and let that represent. You can create your own story around feeling, which will then kind of like backfill your image, if that makes sense. So you can always go with a movement. I want it to feel this way. Okay, well, what could feeling that way look like? So that's how you can backfill into an image, if you'd like. Allison shared Wheel of Fortune with guidance and support. I love that. That's beautiful. Kayla said, I had to open my eyes when you talked about Phoenix and joy because it snapped me up. Ooh, I like that. Okay. Janice said, first new image I got was that I have been trying to find outside of me what already is inside of me. Oh, so good. So good. These are fantastic. Now here's the work. You have to feed that image, right? You have to keep feeding that image, and that image will nurture you. If you keep coming back to that image a couple times a day, I promise you, in just a few short days, look for the breadcrumbs. Look for the synchronicities because you will be guided. Something will show up on your path and it'll say, here you go. Here's a validation. You'll see something today on TV or on a billboard or overheard in a conversation. It'll come out through somebody else's words and it will be like, what? It'll try to get your attention. Synchronicity. When that happens, when those synchronistic moments happen, just nod and go, of course it's here. I'm constellating this new image within my psyche, right? This new image. I love that. I love that. Rainu, just wanted to hear this wisdom as I navigate the unknown with joy. Oh, so good, right? So, can't that be beautiful too? We can be in the unknown and it doesn't have to be difficult always. It doesn't have to be painful or struggle. It can just be this joyous exploration. And maybe that's the image of just, I'm picking these wildflowers as I'm walking this path and I'm so excited to see what shows up, what's next. But I'm enjoying where I am. So I don't even need to rush to what's next. So that's the beauty in this, right? But I'll tell you what, when I started working with that, flipping that image, it was immediate. It was immediate. I actually caught myself I think it was the very next day, because, the first day I had these epiphanies and I was so excited how quickly our humanness just kicks right back in. That's the beauty of shadow work. It's always unfolding. And the very next day, I went to go describe something and I was having a conversation with my husband. And I remember him just being like, oh my God, why does it just have to be so difficult? And I felt the pulling, the dragging the people of the mountain. And I was like, no, 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 we're changing our language around this right now, because even though he was describing something that was personal, it related to something that I also had my attention on. And so I was like, oh my gosh, here it is again. I'm like, no, we're changing our language here. We're changing our language here. So mythic resonance is where we can read fairy tales, stories. We can pay attention to the underlying order, connection, things that are going on. And if you trust that your psyche is leading you, I refer to psyche as a she, this guiding thing. She's leading me. Because here's the thing that's really cool about something I learned about Jungian psychology and depth psychology is that they believe the psyche is self regulating. And I think that's fascinating, right? Because we know the body can be self regulating. We know the body wants to bring itself into balance and it can find harmony and homeostasis when it's permitted to do so. when it isn't impacted or influenced by whether it's things we're doing or contributing to. But the psyche is also self regulating, which means it knows what we need. It's leading us toward the thing, the people, the experiences, what have you. And sometimes there's contrast in that. All right, let's see. So Janice shared, I saw Queen of Hearts and just looked this up. Some interpretation suggests that the Queen of Hearts embodies the fear children might have of adult anger and authority. Wow, that's powerful. That's powerful. So interesting. Yeah, yeah, that's really interesting. I have a feeling if you dive deeper into that storyline, you'll see other parallels as well. I feel like there will be some other parallels that pop up for you. So, if we consider this idea that the psyche is self regulating and it's moving us toward wholeness, that means the things that show up on our path are part of that process too. And we can use discernment, right? And to work with what it is we're meant to work with, to transmute, to purify, whatever that is. And there's language, it sounds woo woo and whatever, but really, it's powerful when you learn how to transmute the things that show up on your path and come back to these inner images and work with them. And you'll be given opportunities. You'll catch yourself in the old language. It wants to come in so quickly as we are rewiring our consciousness and our brain, physical brain with new neural pathways and the unconscious and the things within the nervous system. It is all connected. It's all connected. In fact, I have something I want to share with you guys too as we start to bring this to a close. If this has resonated with you and you love this, please let me know. I plan on doing more of these here in this space. So this one was like just a trial. Let me test this out. I'm actually going to do another one on Friday for paid members called I think it's Retrieve Your Power. I think I called it, and I'm going to be walking through a little bit of a process. Right now, I have my annual fee set at $75 for Substack. And so that gives you basically all of the content for the whole year for $75. And I usually have an article that goes out once a week. We have a newsletter that's starting this month, or starting in the month of April, that's coming out. I have bonus content on my podcast that you can have access to. My podcast is its own free episode open to the public. Anybody can listen to that. You don't have to be a paid member or anything for that. But the bonus content, where I start going into fairy tales and the symbolism and the deeper work, and I sometimes have journal prompts or I have guided audios and things like that that I've been including, that is all included in that $75 annual membership. It's 75 a year, not a month. So I just want to put that out there if any of you feel guided to upgrade to experience more of this type of work. And so my intention is to come on here and do more of these types of lives for paid subscribers as my thank you. And I love this. I love being able to engage and share here. So thank you also for your presence. I have one more invitation. I actually sent this out to private clients. So we already have some lovely people that are joining in, and I'm so excited. I do have a group, it's a hybrid group mentoring program that is starting the end of April. It's for the season of spring. It's not, it's 7 weeks long. So we're not doing like the entire quarter of spring, but there's a reason I chose the number seven. So for 7 weeks, we work together twice a week, actually, on Mondays and Thursdays. So you really get 14 sessions, but it is 7 weeks long. We're going to look at seven myths. I say myths slash fairy tales. And we'll be doing kind of like I did today, but there will be a specific practice for each one of them. And all of this is oriented around the dark goddess. And the other thing I'm layering in is for those of you, again, that really are drawn to shamanism, but also drawn to law of attraction, Abraham Hicks style stuff, depth psychology, Jungian work. You really love it all. You just really want the depth part of it. All of that is included. The mentoring group is small. I am not allowing any more than 11 people. I know a couple of those spots already for a fact have filled from my private clients. So we do have some spots if you feel guided to join us. I will put that information here, I think. I haven't done this before, but we'll see how it goes. Anyway, we're working with the dark goddesses. And the way we're working with the dark goddesses is through recognizing it's the disowned and suppressed parts of us. It is not about evil or witchcraft or not. I mean, I love the word witch, don't get me wrong, it's totally misunderstood, but the path of the dark goddess is about how we take the gifts from our challenges and our struggles and that alchemy of gold, right? How do we bring out the gold from the psyche? So, how do we constellate these new images I've been talking about? But the goddesses have specific, very specific modes. And I don't treat goddesses like stereotypes. So, the difference between the work I'm sharing with you in my program and what you might find in a typical workshop or a class on goddesses is they tend to focus on the stereotype. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's wonderful to learn about what colors, what tools, what energies to work with. All of that is fantastic. I'm focusing on the psychological processes, how these things, these goddesses are already at work within the nervous system. And you would be surprised. I'll give you a little hint. For example, Persephone was forced into the underworld. This is part of a myth, right? She's forced into the underworld by Hades, who's the king of like the underworld. Or Hades rules the underworld, and so Persephone is forced into the underworld by Hades. Her mother Demeter is beside herself and is heartbroken and says basically casts out this intention, if until my daughter returns, is rescued, comes home, everything stops. I'm stopping time, I'm stopping everything. So no more harvest, no more flowers and plants. This deep freeze flows through the land, and that's what we tend to call winter. So winter is this time where Persephone's gone into the underworld. There's a whole big story, a whole lot more. I go into it. Spring is Persephone's emergence from the underworld. What was meant to destroy her, she ends up becoming the queen of it. She becomes the queen of the underworld. So instead of it killing her, taking her out, becoming her doomed sort of punishment, she rules the underworld and she returns in the spring. So she comes home in the spring, and now she's coming out of the underworld with her wisdom. She's presenting her wisdom. So the land comes alive again, right? Demeter allows the growth, allows everything to come back. Now there's more to it. There's more nuance to it. That was a really bad retelling, to be honest with you. I have quite a bit more around that. Um, so the idea is that we will work with these various dark goddesses beyond a stereotypical sort of like this one means this and this one is this kind of thing. We'll get into the psychological way that these archetypes are already inherent within the feminine psyche in the unconscious. And they're activated. And how do we know? Well, when we experience numbness, that might be the shadow side of Persephone, where everything goes still, silent. We might be out of touch with feeling, with sensation. I'm going to speak to things in a what I think is a unique way around the dark goddesses, the nervous system, psychological processes, myth and fairy tale, and shadow work around all of it. This is my first time running this specific group. So it is half off. Okay. It's actually more than half off. This specific group, I when we go through the whole thing and all the content is done and loaded and people go to purchase this later, it will be $2,500 for the 7 weeks. I currently have it at $997, and you can do a payment plan. And we already sold some of the spots. I do not want more than 11 women. I know my capacity and I honor that. And I know that I can be of service in a solid way to no more than 11 women at one time. We will have a private space to come together in to process. We'll meet on Zoom. It'll be live, it'll be recorded for us. So if you can't make all of the sessions, that's fine. We'll have one gathering where it's just discussion, mentoring, guidance. You ask questions, we talk. We have another that is some lecture mixed with some process. And so it's 2 sessions once a week, 2 sessions a week for 7 weeks. And it's called The Path of the Dark Goddess, Gifts from the Underworld, and how to unleash the magic within the feminine unconscious. So if you feel guided to join me, I'll put more information here. And like I said, we do have some of the spots already taken by private clients, and we have amazing women already hopping in there. And I'm so excited for this process. It's never the same. It's these groups are never the same. We work with different stories, different myths, different archetypal energies. I explain the gatekeeper, the ego, how to work with that more, the unknown, the liminality, all of it. So if you feel guided to join, we'd love to have you. Also, if you want a little more information on that, I have a link I'll drop in here so you can look at my website. I've got like the breakdown of week by week. I'm not telling you the full agenda because some of it's a very intuitive thing as I work through, but I do give you an idea of each way to work with it. The other thing I will say about this is a lot of the people that are drawn to this type of work with me are it's like three things. Either they do this for their personal work, they do this because they're an entrepreneur and they're wanting to really have these bigger breakthroughs in their business and their finances and expanding in their soul work, or somewhere in the middle. Maybe they don't really have a business, they don't think they're an entrepreneur, but they're a creative of some kind and they just want to tap more deeply into that and release restrictions and things like that. So on Friday, I will have a blog post go out that goes a little deeper into the dark goddesses and the law of attraction with Abraham Hicks and the parallels between them and how they work together, which is so essential because a lot of times they're separate, right? It's like, oh, you like law of attraction, you can't like shadow work. Well, that's not true at all. They actually blend, and one is dependent on the other for that expansion. So, anyhow, thank you for being with me today. I hope this has helped you on some level. I think it's been such a joy to be with you all, and I hope that you've received something out of it. And if you have any questions, feel free to personally reach out to me as well. If you have questions about the program, like I said, I'll put that information in here somewhere. I haven't done this before, so I don't know if I post the link. I'm not sure. I'll come back after this is done, and then I'll be sending this out as well. And come back here. This will be here for you. So if you don't have to be a paid subscriber to see this, right? I want this to be accessible. So yes, I do have paid offerings, but also you can be a free subscriber here on Substack. And almost everything I put out, I think it's like the first 250 words are free. We're working on making some more articles free, as well as that balance between the paid subscribers that contribute and those that just really want to be nurtured and hop in and have some, material that supports them, but maybe they're not ready to commit or that's not accessible yet. And that's okay. So I want to be of service to both in that way. Thank you for being here, for bearing with me as I do this first live and get through this all and my non-filtery camera, which is like amazing. But yeah, I was all like, "Oh, I look so nice on my computer with my filters and my lighting." And then Substack's like, "Yeah, no, you can't do a live from your laptop. You've got to do it from your phone." So this has been a learning experience for me as well. Thank you again. And if you think this could help anyone, if there's someone in your life, a friend that you think might resonate with this work or could use just some support during this time. I know a lot of us are feeling lots of uncertainty. Please, feel free to share this with them as well. All right, that friends, thank you so much. Enjoy your day. I'm going to try to come back in here and add some links. And thanks for the support and the connection and for playing along with me. And I'm excited to see how you all start to generate and work with your new images. All right, thank you. Take care, everybody.